I spoke to you in the first call itself. I understood that I feel very comfortable talking to you, and you are so friendly. At no point did I feel like I felt like you can be a confidant for me, and I can just say any of my weaknesses in front of you and not feel embarrassed about them, or want to hide something. And that level of trust really helped me open up to you and discuss all of it, A to Z. Give a lot of credit to you here, and I would say that I came in with just an idea of what I wanted to put in my essays, with not a lot of structure of how exactly it's going to be.
Hi everyone, this is Piyush Ranjan. I'm the founder and chief consultant of Management Masters. We are a boutique admission consulting firm for the top MBA programs around the world. Today we have with us Disha Gurnani. Disha worked with us for multiple different schools, and she ended up securing admits from 2 of the top 10 universities in the world. She received an admit from HEC Paris with a scholarship, as well as an admit from Kellogg, which is one of the M7 schools in the US. So without further ado, let's hear it from Disha. Disha, it's absolutely amazing to have you. Would you please sort of share a very quick introduction about yourself? What have you been doing? And it's great to hear you back.
Hey Piyush, thank you so much for having me. And yes, it's been a long journey. And when you put it like that, I am not able to believe that that's where I ended up. So I have done my engineering from Manipal, post which I went on to do my MBA in finance from NMIMS Mumbai. After that, I worked with JP Morgan in investment banking for around 4 years. And we'll be going to Kellogg in the fall this 2022.
That's absolutely amazing. It's something that's very interesting, and I would want to sort of maybe learn a bit more about that from you. So you were working in the investment banking domain after an MBA from NMIMS. So could you just tell us about the kind of work that you were doing, and how did your career progression look like, and what exactly did sort of push you to think about a second MBA?
Great. So I joined JP Morgan as a first year analyst in the investment banking team. And there it was completely new to me in terms of, things like working on Excel for the first time, a lot of that. But as you would expect an investment banking job to be, it was very high pressure and it was very analytical. Although I had an MBA in finance, there was a lot more within the finance domain as well that I learned in JP Morgan. And during my, let's say, 4 years there, I went on to, have a stint in Toronto as well for around 3 months. And so that was a really new experience for me, working in a different geography for the first time. So I'm grateful over there that I got that opportunity at JP Morgan. And I became an associate in the last year, and that transition from being an analyst to an associate, as I took on more and more, leadership roles within the organization. I was working on the internships team, a couple more things, and also mentoring new interns and analysts. And so I understood that I like the leadership part of things. I like taking on more responsibility over there. And second, which ties into the second MBA bit, which will come up soon, is I wanted to understand the business, how it works outside of just the finance part of it as well. So knowing what I knew about finance, but also wanting to explore more, was primarily the key reason why I wanted to go forward with an MBA.
Okay, that makes so much sense. So could you help us understand a bit, like what exactly are you expecting out from your second MBA? In terms of, let's say, your goals from your second MBA.
Sure. So building on what I said, I wanted to explore corporate strategy, and that within that, when I was researching what are my options over there, something called as a leadership development programs that companies have really jumped out for me, where so my my intention was that I wanted to learn all the different parts of a business, and a leadership development program does precisely that. It rotates you within the different verticals and sometimes even geographies within a particular company. And this was something that really interested me, because within the same ecosystem of a company, you're learning all the different moving parts. So that was, so doing a little bit of research on what are the companies that come to the top 10 business schools in the world. This was one option that I really liked, and sort of what I ended up saying in my applications as well, because that is my first option. Apart from that, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so I was just thinking, asking about like the goals that you have from your second MBA. So one part, as you said, is looking at the leadership development programs, and if there are anything else.
Other than that, as I mentioned, I had an opportunity to work in Toronto, and I really liked, working outside of my geography, which is India. And that was something I wanted to do when I decided that I want to move abroad permanently. And so a second MBA would be the perfect way to, go about doing that. So that's a goal that I want to do post MBA. And yeah, so mainly leadership development roles, want to move abroad, and kind of have a little bit more exposure to different cultures. So this is something that I felt that would be really interesting in my second MBA, because people are coming in from all different parts of the world with very different experiences, and peer learning is something that is unparalleled in the top B schools in the world. So I'm really looking forward to doing.
That sounds great. So, could you share with me what was the biggest apprehension that you had before you started applying for your second MBA, or before you got into the application process? Could you share a bit of that?
So I had two main apprehensions. One was, how well would a second MBA be taken in the professional industry? And now on the other side of it, I have all the reasons why I can say this is why I did it, this is why I went ahead with it. But when I first started thinking about this, it was still new. Not a lot of people were doing it. And so that was my first apprehension. And second was just the sheer amount of money that is involved, and just leveraging your entire life's earnings.
Absolutely.
And so for me, it was important to know that I'm doing that with a purpose and a reason, and there is a plan to mitigate that at the end of it. So those were my two main apprehensions.
All right, that sounds fair. Now, moving into the application process itself, right? Obviously, the application process is a huge thing with international MBA programs, and the first thing that comes up is the GMAT preparation, right? The GMAT and the GRE prep that people do. One of the reasons why it becomes so difficult for people to manage is essentially because they're also working in very, very difficult jobs like you were, right? So you don't really end up getting a lot of time. So could you walk us through a bit about your GMAT journey, and how did you go about that? How did you manage preparing for your GMAT, and what strategies worked out for you best? Maybe what kind of resources did you utilize a bit? So I think that would become quite a long question, but it would be great to hear your story, because you've had a very interesting sort of journey with the GMAT itself, right? So really looking forward to that.
Yeah, so thanks for asking this. It's my favorite question to answer, mainly because my journey has been way more convoluted than for most people, particularly on GMAT. So applying for 2022 fall, I had to start my applications in around July 2021. And I back calculated this. So I started my GMAT prep in 2020, around a year before that, as most people do. And I spent around 5 to 6 months just doing the usual things that people do, go refreshing. So I'm an engineer, so it's more of a refresher on the quant end. So just refreshing your quant parts, and then practicing the verbal stuff, taking some of the online resources available, So I had taken a course around 30,000 rupees, but like I did that, and I went to the center with my mask on, and I got a really bad score, a really bad score. And this was after 6 months of preparation. So I was pretty disheartened after that, and I wanted to understand. Like I didn't know what was the way going forward. Immediately after that, I tried to find like some private tutors who could, like just get the job done, which is what like I think most aspirants try to figure out, how do I get this score. And after talking to some of them, I realized they were really highly priced. Just the private tutor part of it, not the online resources, but the private tutoring was pretty highly priced. And I felt like this is something that I can do on my own, because it's not like very technical. There's just a way, the correct way of doing it. So I decided I will not go with the private tutors. I will just start from the basics.
Mhm.
And so when I asked around my friends who had done this before, what I heard was the best resource, the most detailed resource ended up being the Manhattan books. So there are like a pack of 9 books, which has like various verbal, quant, and then some advanced books. So I did the most rigorous way possible. I read them end to end twice.
Okay,
I
that's
did
that's
that, and
nice.
I and I practiced all of the questions. I did that, and that took me. So I made a plan of how much time I would need to spend on just doing the Manhattan part, and then the practicing part, and then finally the mocks, etc. So I spent around 2 to 3 months just going through the Manhattan stuff, and after that I again started doing the official guide questions and all of that. But one key feedback that I had received from some friends, and also like previous tutors that I had tried to reach out to, was to make an error log. And this is something that not a lot of people do or know that they have to do. uh, so the idea is that each of the questions that you're solving, maybe you'll get some right, you'll get some wrong. You have to know why you got the ones wrong that you got wrong. So I did that for literally each of the questions that I practiced in the official guide, and also the mocks. I made an error log, and then you start seeing the patterns of what mistakes you're making, and that's when you can rectify that. So that really helped. And the second thing was, towards like the last 2 months of when I was going to take the GMAT again in July, I started practicing in a timed manner. So the number of questions that are there on the exam, both in quant and verbal, taking that in those many minutes. And I know people don't have 2 to 3 hours straight while working to do that. So what I did was I just split it. I used to take 1 hour at one time for quant, and 1 hour in the morning, and 1 hour for verbal in the evening.
That's
And
quite a
like,
nice strategy.
yeah, so but it was always timed. Like I have to finish it during that. And then when you start doing that a lot more, you see that you finish before time, and that sort of gives you the confidence that you are able to do that. Because in the exam there is a certain amount of nervousness which makes you slow. So if you're doing that, taking lesser time in the normal practicing, I think it will be just enough time in the exam, and which is what ended up being for me. And so I took the exam in the beginning of July, and this time I decided I will not go to the center because I don't think I was doing well with the mask. So I took that at home. I took the GMAT online, and I think it went well, but towards the end of it, there was some technical glitch. I lost around 5 minutes in the quant section, and I ended up with a 710. And this is when I think started speaking to you.
Yeah.
Feel free to pitch in. And yeah, so at that point, we decided that while 710 is a good score, it may not be a good enough score for some of the schools that I wanted to aim. And it really narrowed down the number of schools that I could realistically get into. So I had a conversation with you, and I genuinely believed that I could do better because I had spent a lot of time, trying to get those things right. And in the mocks also, I was getting the right scores. So I just retook it. I thought I'll do it in the minimum amount of time possible. So 14 days later, towards the end of July, I took it again, and this time again GMAT online, and this time I ended up with a 740, and I was pleasantly surprised because I thought I'll increase it by 10-20 points, so did not expect a 740. And at that point, I understood that this is indeed the best I can do.
No, but that was, I think, if I remember correctly, that was, it did not take you a lot of time, or it was not a very hesitant approach from you, right? You knew that, okay, there were some things that went wrong in the exam the previous time. So you were not hesitant to take it again. You were fairly confident that, yes, if you take it again, and if everything goes right, you will have a certain kind of a score that you were expecting, right? So I think if I remember very, very clearly when you dropped me the message that you had finally received the 740, I was like, obviously, right? So that was the initial sort of reaction that I had personally, right? But it was a very, very interesting journey that you had, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to ask you on that front. So if let's say because this is something that comes up with a lot of candidates, a lot of aspirants, right? They get stuck with the GMAT so much, or they're just not able to sort of build that right strategy to get through with GMAT or get the kind of scores that they're looking for. So if you had to give one piece of advice to sort of people who are preparing for the GMAT, what would that be?
Yeah, so one major piece of advice I felt is people always compare their GMAT journeys with others. And there are a lot of people who just get the, score that they wanted or a near enough score in the first time with minimal amount of preparation. And I would say, yeah, maybe they are that smart, or maybe it was luck. It's a combination of both, because even on the exam day, the percentiles and all really affect your score. That was not the case for me, and that is not the case for a lot of candidates. And my piece of advice is to not feel like, oh, I'm an outlier. Why am I not able to do this? Why am I stuck? It's perfectly normal. While GMAT on the surface looks like a very straightforward exam, there is a lot going on, especially in the verbal section, that is difficult to get right in that amount of time. At least for me, I felt it's not. I had scored a 99 percentile in verbal and CAT. So for me, I thought, oh, I'll just show up for GMAT, and the language looks pretty easy. I'll just do it. There's a lot more going on behind the scenes, the way they structure the grammar, sentence correction, and the expectations that they have in the RC part as well. All three of them are structured in a way, SC, RC, and CR, they're structured in a way to make you really apply yourself. And so don't underestimate the exam. And don't be disheartened if you are stuck somewhere. All of us have, like a lot more of us have gone through that. And exactly. Just with the right strategies that I mentioned before, I think it's crackable.
Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, nobody's going to ask you, whether you finished your GMAT in 2 months or whether it took you 1 year, right? What matters is the score that you have, whether it's the 740 or the 750. So focus, keep your eyes on the prize and sort of keep moving ahead, right?
Yes.
In a way. You mentioned very clearly that you had kind of a set of schools that you were targeting, right? So could you tell us a bit about how did you choose those schools? Why did you want to go to those schools?
Yeah. So primarily two things. Like one was I was going to do a second MBA. There is a lot riding on this. So I really wanted to target the top schools. And after the score, I thought I could. I had a fair chance of targeting them, and I had a profile that people think that I can make it through. So one was that, and second, I wanted to target schools which were not very finance heavy schools, you would say, because I wanted to explore more within the marketing or corporate strategy side of things. So that is sort of also what drove me to filter out those very finance specific schools. And third, my logic of choosing was to have realistic choices. I did not want to be in a place where I'm applying to schools again in round 2, because round 1 itself was exhausting. So the choices that I made really were little bit above my realistic, so slightly dream school, then very realistic choices, and then a little bit lower on the spectrum. So I didn't move very low or very high from the sort of school that I wanted to go to in terms of ranking. And that's kind of how I chose the schools that I applied.
So could you share like which schools did you apply to? What were the kind of results that you received?
Yeah, so I applied to London Business School and HEC Paris in Europe. And in the US, I applied to Duke Fuqua, Kellogg, and Yale.
Okay.
Results were received interviews from everything except Yale, and eventually ended up with HEC and Kellogg.
Sounds absolutely amazing. So let's come back to those schools a bit more, right? And talk about the application process itself, right? Because both of these schools that you mentioned, in fact, not both, but all the four schools, they have very, very different and very sort of unique applications by themselves, right? LBS is probably one of the biggest applications in the world, right? Probably second after INSEAD. HEC Paris is not, I think, the third largest probably of them all. And then Kellogg has a very different set of questions. Duke Fuqua has a 25 random things about yourself. So very, very different kind of questions that all of these schools pose to you. So what really worked out for you, and how did you approach the essays or the application in general, which sort of allowed you to succeed through these applications?
That's a great question. I would give a lot of credit to you here, and I would say that I came in with just an idea of what I wanted to put in my essays, with not a lot of structure of how exactly it's going to be. And so for me, I felt the best thing that we did were the initial 3-4 workshops that we did, where we really dug deep into what my story is, what my goals need to be, and how those tied into each other. And this process a little uncomfortable, because you have to really look at yourself and say, okay, this is something that I can do and I cannot do, and this is what I have done and this is what I'm lacking. And you have to be very honest, not just with yourself but also with the consultant that you're working with. And you are so friendly. I at no point did I feel like I felt like you can be a confidant for me, and I can just say any of my weaknesses in front of you and not feel embarrassed about them, or want to hide something. And that level of trust really helped me open up to you and discuss all of it, A to Z. So having that structure in place with the workshops really makes it easier for you to approach the essays. And the second thing, again, this is also credit to you, just putting the deadlines for all the 5 schools. Even though in the beginning we were working only for 5 schools, you helped me. We were working for 3 schools. You helped me, put those timelines in place for all 5 of them, so that nothing overlaps. Like there is no stress about, oh, will I be able to make the deadline or not? And having that peace of mind really helped me, work on my essays in a systematic and researched way. On the essays, yes, they were very different. For the Duke Fuqua 25, I just thought I don't have 25 things to share. I'm not that interesting.
Don't
But
worry about it. All of us started the same way. Like we just can't write beyond number 15.
yeah, but yeah, even when I got stuck at number 10 or 15 and you said, okay, these are some areas that we have not thought about, feel free to talk more about them, and feel free to include more informal or someone would think irrelevant things. But Fuqua is looking for exactly that. So that getting the interview, it means that the essay was on point. At least for me, that's the feedback. So that really helped me. And the second bit about essays is just the frequency with which your responses came on my essays. It really lightened the heavy part of it for me, because having a quick feedback on whatever you've written makes sure that whatever I wrote yesterday, today, if I have the feedback, it's still in the back of my mind and I've not forgotten it over 3-4 days. And so that really helps you iterate faster. And one thing I want to highlight here is some people, take consultants just for essays for like 1 hour, 2 hour. Working with you end to end really helped me because you knew the context behind each of the essays that we were doing. So there was at no point within the essay writing process that I had to, sit and explain to you, no, this is where I'm coming from. Understand my point of view. You already understood my point of view. So that was really helpful.
All right, I think I'm going to try with happiness. But this is very kind of you. What a very quick question from my end, and I almost feel embarrassed now to ask about this because you've already said so many nice things, right? Is what led you to choose to work with us? Because we are a very small firm. We are not really known by a lot of people in general. So how did you get to know about us? Why did you decide to work with us? If you could share a bit about that.
So I have quite a lot of friends right now in the first year of MBA, so basically a year ahead of me, and they took on consultants, some Indian consultants, some again US consultants, and I got a lot of feedback from them on where they were successful, where they were let down, and the two main takeaways for me were at least the non-Indian consultants. They were charging a lot, and again I keep coming back to the money part of it, but it really plays into the big process because you're investing a lot and you have to really make those choices smartly, whether it's enough return on your amount of money that you're putting in. And I understand that people go into this process with everything riding on it. So sometimes the approach is, okay, take as much money as you want, everything is riding on this, so just take it and do the best. But I felt that going with an Indian consultant would be better for me because, again, understanding the Indian context and why the choices that I made in the past, both professionally and personally, an Indian consultant would be able to do that better for me. I'm sure other people have had different experiences, but I'll speak to mine. And second, I spoke to a lot of Indian consultants as well. And the issue with big firms is that the main person who is heading it sometimes does not work with you because they're very busy. And I found out about you through a friend, and he had a great experience. And I must have spoken to around 8-9 consultants before I decided to work with you. Yeah.
I had no clue about that. I had absolutely
no. And even though the pricing was varied across the consultants, for me, while the pricing was important, it was also important that I feel comfortable while talking to you. And it was like I spoke to you in the first call itself. I understood that I feel very comfortable talking to you, and that I cannot say that for a lot of other consultants that I spoke to. It was a cherry on the top that we worked out so well. Like the experience working with you was so well, but I went with my gut.
Again, I think I'm going to have a box of tissues now. But that has been very, very interesting. Let's move into sort of the last part of the interview that we have, which we call the rapid fire. We will have just 5-6 questions thrown at you, and you can answer them in one sentence and one word. That depends upon you. Right? So let's start with the first question. What is the biggest myth about MBA applications that you've realized through your own journey?
The biggest myth, I think, is people either undersell or oversell all the time. So they will either be extremely underconfident and apply to schools that are just safety, or they will overestimate their abilities and apply to wild schools. And I think that somewhere in between is the right balance.
Okay, that sounds pretty good. What is the one thing at Kellogg that you're really looking forward
to? Truly experiencing the teamwork and collaboration that everyone talks about. I have felt it in parts with talking to current students and also my cohort right now, but really being there and experiencing that in person, I think it's going to be very interesting.
All right. Two side-by-side questions. The first one is, what was the best part of the entire application process that you loved?
For me, that was the initial workshops that we did. I think I understood myself on a deeper level for the first time, and really looked at my weaknesses very head on, both strengths and weaknesses, but it's harder to look at the weaknesses part of it. So that was interesting.
Okay. And what was the worst part of the application process that you hated the most?
Hands down, GMAT.
I think that comes up very often, right? One final question, one piece of advice that you will give to people who are planning to apply for MBA programs this year or later on.
I have talked about, I think this has come up in my entire interview, planning. Just planning the number of months it's going to take for GMAT, planning the number of days it's going to take for each. I know this is like very repetitive, but it is the only thing that helps when you're working a full-time job. Otherwise, everything goes haywire. So plan it all out in as much detail as possible.
Absolutely perfect. Thank you so much, Disha. It has been a pleasure talking to you. I wish you the best with Kellogg and with everything that you take up in the future. And really happy that we work together on your applications.